Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Trump summit in Alaska raises concerns. Complex implications emerge from the meeting. National Guard deployment sparks debate. Washington residents react to the deployment. King Charles honors VJ Day. The 80th anniversary of peace is marked. California Redraws election maps. The state seeks to counter Texas's influence. White House considers Intel investment. The move supports manufacturing efforts. Global plastics treaty negotiations fail. Deep divisions hindered progress. Syria coastal violence reveals war crimes. A UN report details the atrocities. Rakhine state faces humanitarian crisis. Conflict and a blockade exacerbate the situation. Israeli society divided over Gaza. The ongoing conflict fuels societal divisions. South Africa grapples with army chief's comments. A controversy surrounds the army chief's remarks. Mali's security crisis deepens. Allegations and extended Junta rule persist. Nanjing massacre remains a sensitive issue. The event continues to impact Sino-Japanese relations. Ukraine's Frontlines and ceasefire prospects. Analyzed efforts to map the situation continue. Tensions rise in the South China Sea. China accuses the Philippines of aggression. China works to facilitate dialogue. Discussions are underway regarding border disputes. Trump's Alaska summit, a high-stakes meeting with complex implications. Donald Trump's invitation to Vladimir Putin for a summit at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska represents a significant and potentially destabilizing event in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. The meeting, occurring at a base historically used for surveillance of the Soviet Union, carries profound symbolic weight, signaling a shift away from traditional Cold War dynamics and a focus on a redefined geopolitical landscape. Key to the summit's complexity is Trump's rationale, a suggestion from Putin himself, and his stated intention of a feel-out meeting to test Putin's resolve. Despite skepticism surrounding the summit's potential for concrete progress, Trump maintains a belief that it could lead to a swift resolution to the conflict. However, critics highlight the potential for the meeting to be a distraction, offering a superficial appearance of diplomacy while failing to address the core issues. The location itself, Elmendorf Air Force Base, adds another layer of significance. Historically a critical surveillance hub during the Cold War, it now serves as a venue for a meeting between the leader of a nation embroiled in a major war and the leader of a country that has condemned the invasion. Local residents in Anchorage have expressed a mix of apprehension and hope, with some displaying Ukrainian flags as a symbolic gesture. The meeting is viewed by many as a test of Trump's ability to influence Putin and potentially bring an end to the hostilities. The summit's outcome remains uncertain, but it is widely recognized as a pivotal moment in the Russia-Ukraine war and a demonstration of Trump's unconventional approach to foreign policy. The meeting is being scrutinized globally, with observers assessing its potential impact on the conflict and the broader international order. Washington residents react to National Guard deployment and Trump's claims. Recent reports detail the varied reactions of Washington, D.C. residents to the deployment of 800 National Guard troops and the federal takeover of the city's police department, spearheaded by President Donald Trump. Residents express considerable skepticism towards Trump's claims of rampant crime and a city besieged by thugs and killers, highlighting a stark contrast with the reality perceived within the city. Many residents find the presence of the National Guard troops unsettling, describing them as largely inactive and focused on observation rather than proactive crime prevention. Outside Union Station, the troops' activities were limited to allowing tourists to take photographs, generating feelings of frustration and disbelief among locals. Several individuals questioned the justification for the significant financial expenditure associated with deploying the National Guard, particularly given the city's previously established safety record. Trump's directive for homeless individuals to move out has also drawn strong criticism. Residents express concern that this action could lead to the unjust confinement or arrest of vulnerable individuals who simply require assistance, rather than punishment. Volunteers and community members are particularly worried about the potential for increased hardship and displacement for those experiencing homelessness. The federal intervention has been widely viewed as an overreaction and an unwarranted exercise of power. Many residents feel that the situation has been misrepresented to justify the deployment, labeling the claims as fake news. The limited activity of the National Guard and the contentious nature of the homeless directive have fueled widespread discontent. The deployment has become a focal point for criticism of Trump's administration and its policies. The situation underscores a growing divide between the president's narrative and the lived experiences of Washington, D.C. residents. King Charles leads VJ Day commemorations marking 80 years of peace. Commemorations across the United Kingdom and Japan mark the 80th anniversary of Victory over Japan Day, VJ Day, signifying the end of World War II. The events underscored the immense sacrifices made by veterans and civilians during the conflict and highlighted the enduring values of freedom and peace. In the United Kingdom, King Charles III led the principal ceremony at the National Memorial Arboretum in Redraws, alongside Prime Minister Keir Starmer and numerous veterans aged 96 to 105 who served in East Asia and the Pacific. The king delivered a poignant audio message, reaffirming the eternal remembrance of those who saw the forces of liberty prevail, and emphasized the ongoing relevance of their wartime values in addressing contemporary global conflicts. The event featured flypasts by the Red Arrows and wartime aircraft, alongside a solemn 2-minute silence. Elsewhere in the UK, remembrance events took place at locations including the Tower of London, Belfast City Hall, and Edinburgh Castle, with a lone piper playing on the castle battlements. The king also acknowledged the devastating impact of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, urging recognition of the immense price paid by the citizens of those cities. In Japan, Emperor Naruhito expressed deep remorse at Yasukuni Shrine, a site honoring war dead, including convicted war criminals, reflecting on the war's tragic consequences. Tens of thousands of Japanese citizens braved extreme heat to pay their respects. Across the UK, veterans were honored and their stories were shared, reinforcing the legacy of courage and resilience. The events served as a reminder of the global impact of the war and the importance of safeguarding peace. The commemorations concluded with a renewed commitment to upholding the values that underpinned the Allied victory and to preventing future conflicts. The significance of VJ Day continues to resonate today, reminding us of the cost of war and the imperative of diplomacy and understanding. California to change election maps to counter Texas. California Governor Gavin Newsom unveiled a strategic plan to reshape the state's congressional districts, directly responding to what he perceives as an attempt by Donald Trump and the Texas Republican leadership to manipulate the 2026 midterm elections. Newsom's initiative, centered around a special election in November, would allow California voters to approve new maps, effectively neutralizing Texas's proposed redistricting efforts. This move is framed as a defensive action against a perceived rigging of the system. The core of the conflict lies in Texas's planned redistricting, spearheaded by Governor Greg Abbott, which aims to secure 5 additional House seats for Republicans. This effort is viewed by Democrats as a deliberate attempt to bolster the GOP's slim majority in the House of Representatives. Newsom's plan seeks to counter this by ensuring California maintains its current congressional map. The situation escalated with Texas Democrats fleeing the state to prevent the passage of the Republican-backed maps during a special legislative session. Republicans threatened to arrest the fleeing lawmakers, further intensifying the political battle. Newsom's strategy involves a voter referendum, placing the responsibility for drawing the new district lines squarely in the hands of the Californian electorate. Obama praised Texas Democrats for their resistance, labeling the Texas efforts a systematic assault on democracy. Newsom, a potential presidential candidate, has positioned himself as a staunch opponent of Trump, employing a combative tone and referencing Trump's attempts to rig the system. The California governor's actions are intended to demonstrate a willingness to confront the Trump administration directly. The conflict highlights a broader national struggle over redistricting and the fairness of electoral boundaries. Both Newsom and Obama have emphasized the importance of protecting minority voting rights and ensuring that electoral districts accurately reflect the demographics of the population. The situation underscores the high stakes of the 2026 midterm elections and the potential for partisan battles over congressional districts to shape the balance of power in Congress. The California governor's actions are a calculated response to a perceived threat to democratic processes. White House exploring stake in Intel amid manufacturing push. The Trump administration is actively considering an investment in Intel, a move aimed at bolstering U.S. semiconductor manufacturing and addressing concerns about reliance on foreign competitors. Following a meeting between President Donald Trump and Intel CEO Lip-Bu Tan, fueled by reports of Tan's prior ties to China, discussions began regarding a potential government stake in the struggling chipmaker. Bloomberg initially reported the talks, leading to a significant jump of over 7% in Intel's share price. The White House's interest aligns with its broader strategy to incentivize domestic production, particularly in critical sectors like technology and artificial intelligence. A key component of this initiative is Intel's planned manufacturing hub in Ohio, a project repeatedly delayed but now viewed as a strategic priority. The potential investment would provide crucial funding and support, enabling Intel to overcome recent challenges and compete more effectively. The administration's actions echo similar interventions, such as the recent agreement with rare earth materials company MP Materials, securing a multi-billion-dollar package from the Department of Defense. Additionally, U.S. chipmakers NVIDIA and AMD have reached a deal to pay the government 15% of their Chinese revenue in exchange for export licenses. Intel's CEO, who took over in March, has been focused on restructuring the company and regaining market share, including a workforce reduction of 15%. Intel emphasized its commitment to supporting President Trump's efforts to strengthen U.S. technology leadership. The White House acknowledged the discussions as speculation, unless officially announced. The administration is seeking to establish a model for similar investments in other key U.S. companies. This strategic approach reflects a broader trend of government involvement in private enterprise, particularly in sectors deemed vital to national security and economic competitiveness. The potential Intel stake represents a significant step in this direction, signaling a renewed focus on domestic manufacturing capabilities and technological advancement. The administration is actively exploring opportunities to bolster U.S. leadership in crucial industries, including semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Global plastics treaty talks collapse amidst deep divisions, and international negotiations aimed at establishing a landmark treaty to combat plastic pollution have failed to reach an agreement, highlighting significant divisions between nations. The sixth round of talks, held in Geneva, concluded without a resolution, marking the sixth time negotiations have stalled since 2022. The core disagreement centers on whether the treaty should primarily focus on reducing plastic production at its source or concentrate on managing existing plastic pollution. Approximately 100 nations, including the UK and the European Union, advocate for curbing production, emphasizing the need for systemic change. Conversely, major oil-producing countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Russia, prioritize improved waste collection and recycling infrastructure, viewing plastics as vital to their economy's future, particularly as the world transitions to electric vehicles. Despite a revised text proposed by the chair, Luis Valles from Ecuador, which incorporated elements of the UK's desired approach, including addressing hazardous chemicals and promoting easier recyclability, the oil states remain deeply dissatisfied, deeming the negotiation process problematic. Recycling rates remain exceptionally low, estimated at only around 10%, underscoring the limitations of solely relying on waste management solutions. The Business Coalition, led by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and comprising companies like Nestle and Unilever, support measures such as globally standardized plastic design and a levy on plastic products to finance recycling efforts, projecting potential revenues of $576 billion by 2040. However, environmental groups, including Greenpeace, criticize the negotiations for prioritizing corporate profits over planetary health, asserting that the inability to secure a robust agreement represents a failure to confront the influence of fossil fuel interests. Negotiations are scheduled to resume at a later date, but the fundamental disagreements persist, suggesting a protracted struggle to establish a globally binding plastic treaty. The discussions underscore the complex interplay of economic interests, technological limitations, and environmental concerns in addressing the escalating global plastic pollution crisis. UN report details war crimes committed during Syria coastal violence. A recent United Nations report has concluded that war crimes were likely committed during the sectarian violence that occurred along Syria's coastal regions in March, resulting in approximately 400 civilian deaths. The UN Syria Commission of Inquiry found no evidence of direct orders from the Damascus authorities to initiate the attacks. The conflict stemmed from clashes between interim government forces, largely Sunni Muslim, and fighters linked to the former regime, predominantly Alawite. Following the Islamist-led rebels' ousting of Bashar al-Assad in December, security forces were ambushed, escalating into a brutal cycle of revenge killings. Reinforcements, including thousands of fighters, joined the operation, transforming it into a sectarian conflict. The Alawite community, representing roughly 10% of Syria's population and historically associated with the Assad regime, became a primary target. The commission documented acts that likely amount to crimes, including war crimes encompassing murder, torture, abductions, and inhumane acts related to the deceased. Perpetrators, often interim government forces and regime-affiliated fighters, engaged in systematic violence, frequently questioning civilians about their Alawite affiliation before executing men and boys. The report highlighted horrific details, including families forced to conceal bodies to avoid reprisal, overwhelmed hospitals struggling with mass casualties, and widespread displacement. Witnesses reported armed individuals filming serious human rights violations, including severe beatings and executions. The violence was particularly targeted at Alawite men aged 20 to 50, But women and children were also victims. Thousands fled to Lebanon or a Russian airbase for safety. The UN Commission, based on over 200 interviews and access to affected communities in Latakia, Tartus, Homs, and Hama, emphasized the systematic nature of the attacks. The Commission called for expanded accountability efforts, urging interim authorities to pursue perpetrators regardless of their affiliation or rank. The report warned of ongoing retaliatory attacks, fueled by a heightened climate of fear, demanding urgent intervention from the interim government. The consistent patterns of targeted violence underscore the severity of the human rights violations. Rakhine State faces humanitarian crisis amidst conflict and blockade. A severe humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Myanmar's Rakhine State, characterized by widespread starvation and displacement, exacerbated by ongoing conflict and a military blockade. The United Nations and the World Food Programme (WFP) are urgently appealing for increased donations to avert a full-blown disaster, given the dramatic rise in food insecurity. The situation is particularly dire due to the state's isolation, cut off from the rest of Myanmar since the 2021 military coup, and further restricted by the military's efforts to deny supplies to the Rakhine army. Thousands of Rohingya Muslims, displaced since 2012, now reside in overcrowded camps, primarily the Ontar Kai camp, where dwindling food supplies have led to desperate measures, including attempted suicide. A recent incident involved a father adding insecticide to his family's food, tragically resulting in his death, but saving his family. Similar incidents, including the deaths of another ethnic Rakhine family and an elderly couple who hanged themselves due to lack of funds and food, highlight the extreme hardship. The WFP's funding has plummeted by 60% this year, limiting its ability to assist even 20% of those in severe food insecurity. Farmers have abandoned their rice crops due to the inability to access buyers, and Rohingya fishermen are barred from fishing, a vital source of sustenance. The military's conscription demands further strain families, forcing those without enlisted sons to contribute financially to support those fighting. The Rakhine army's control over much of the state, coupled with the military's blockade, has created a vicious cycle of deprivation. Residents report prices having increased fivefold, and many are surviving on boiled taro roots. Access to aid is severely limited, with international agencies unable to reach areas controlled by the Rakhine army. The ongoing conflict, coupled with the blockade, is creating an environment of immense suffering and raising serious concerns about the long-term prospects for the Rohingya population in Rakhine State. Israeli society divided amidst Gaza conflict. Recent reporting reveals a deeply fractured Israeli society grappling with the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The core issue revolves around differing perspectives on the war's objectives, the handling of the hostage crisis, and the future of Israel's role in the region. A significant segment of the population, particularly within the right-wing government, believes the war is divinely ordained, fueled by messianic fervor, and a conviction that Israel is justified in its actions stemming from Hamas's October 7th attacks. This group emphasizes the need to completely dismantle Hamas and secure the release of hostages, viewing any compromise as a betrayal of Israel's security. Conversely, a substantial portion of Israeli society, particularly in Tel Aviv, expresses profound psychological despair and frustration with the government's handling of the situation. This group advocates for an immediate ceasefire to secure the release of hostages through negotiation, recognizing the devastating human cost of the conflict and the potential for further escalation. Key figures like Avram Berg, a former parliament speaker, highlight the societal fragmentation and the war's detrimental impact on Israel's recovery. The conflict has exposed deep divisions within Israeli society, with some viewing the war as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, while others see it as a tragic and unnecessary loss of life. The hostages remain a central point of contention, with the government's insistence on total Hamas disarmament fueling criticism of its negotiating strategy. Nava Rosalio, a leading organizer of protests, argues that the government's focus on military objectives overshadows the urgent need for a ceasefire. Throughout the conflict, Israelis from all walks of life have expressed a shared desire for the safe return of the hostages, but their approaches to achieving this goal diverge dramatically, reflecting the profound and unsettling divisions tearing at the heart of the nation. The future of Israel, according to many, rests in the hands of its people, with some believing in a miraculous outcome, while others brace for a prolonged and uncertain future. South Africa faces row over Army Chief's Iran comments. A significant controversy has erupted in South Africa following remarks made by Army Chief General Radzani Mafwanya during a recent visit to Iran. The comments, which included pledges of military and political support for Iran and criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza, have drawn condemnation from within the governing coalition and sparked a diplomatic row. The Democratic Alliance, a key component of the South African government, has called for Mafwanya to be subjected to a court-martial, reflecting the severity of the situation. The controversy centers around Mafwanya's statements, which went beyond typical military to military discussions and entered the domain of foreign policy. He stated that Iran and South Africa shared common goals, supporting oppressed and defenseless people globally, and explicitly criticized Israel's role in the ongoing conflict. This has caused considerable tension, particularly with the United States, which has long viewed South Africa's relationship with Iran with suspicion. President Cyril Ramaphosa has acknowledged the issue and confirmed a meeting with Mafwanya to address the ill-advised trip. Ramaphosa's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, stated that the president was unaware of the visit and did not sanction it. The government has distanced itself from Mafwanya's statements, labeling them unfortunate, and asserting they do not represent the official foreign policy stance. The United States, under former President Donald Trump, further exacerbated the situation by cutting off aid to South Africa and accusing the Ramaphosa administration of reinvigorating relations with Iran, an adversary of the U.S. Trump also falsely accused the government of persecuting white people and condemned the bringing of a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. South Africa's long-standing relationship with Iran, dating back to 1995 with the formation of a joint commission of cooperation, has been a persistent source of friction with the U.S. The Institute for Security Studies highlights the historical depth of this relationship. The situation underscores the challenges South Africa faces in navigating its foreign policy and maintaining relationships with key global powers. Mali security crisis, French spy allegations, and extended junta rule. Recent developments in Mali reveal a deepening security crisis compounded by allegations of foreign interference and an extended period of military rule. Following days of speculation, Mali Security Minister, Gendaud Ali Mohamedine, confirmed the arrest of a French national Yan Vizilier on suspicion of spying for France, aiming to destabilize the nation. The junta alleges Vizilier acted on behalf of the French intelligence service, mobilizing political and military figures within Mali. Alongside Vizilier, several army generals, including former Mopti Governor Genabas Dembele, have been detained, bringing the total number of arrests to at least 55. The investigation is ongoing, focusing on identifying potential accomplices and uncovering the extent of foreign involvement. Mali has been grappling with a persistent security crisis since 2012, fueled by Islamist insurgency and ongoing jihadist attacks. This situation initially prompted a military takeover, but the instability persists and has intensified. The junta, led by Gen Assimi Godanta, has extended its rule by 5 years, effectively allowing Gobanta to remain in power until at least 2030, further delaying promised elections. Recent political tensions have escalated with the arrests of former Prime Ministers Moussa Mara and Chogal Martirga, accused of damaging the state's reputation and engaging in embezzlement. These arrests followed rare anti-government protests, which the junta viewed as detrimental to reconciliation efforts. Seeking to counter the jihadist threat, Mali has increasingly relied on Russian allies, mirroring a strategy employed by neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso. Despite these alliances, significant improvements in security remain elusive. The situation underscores the complex challenges facing Mali as it navigates political instability, security threats, and shifting geopolitical alliances, with the French intelligence service remaining a central point of contention. The junta maintains control, prioritizing stability over democratic transitions, while the ongoing investigation seeks to expose the full scope of the alleged destabilization plot. Nanjing Massacre, a lingering wound in Sino-Japanese relations. Recent events surrounding the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II have reignited tensions between China and Japan, primarily focusing on the unresolved issues surrounding the 1937 Nanjing Massacre. The massacre, a brutal 6-week campaign by Japanese forces in Nanjing, remains a deeply sensitive topic, fueling ongoing animosity and mistrust. The release of several Chinese films, such as Dead to Rights, depicting the horrors of the massacre, has amplified public sentiment and prompted reflection on Japan's historical accountability. The films, spearheaded by popular vlogger Hayato Keto, highlight the atrocities and have garnered widespread attention, with the iconic line, "We are not friends, we never were," becoming a potent symbol of Chinese anger and frustration. Many Japanese individuals and public figures continue to deny the scale of the massacre or downplay its significance, further exacerbating the situation. China views Japan's reluctance to offer a full and unequivocal apology as a key element of the ongoing historical dispute. The belief persists that Japan has not adequately acknowledged its wartime actions, extending beyond China to encompass occupied territories like Korea, Malaya, Philippines, and Indonesia. The comfort women, issue, the forced sexual enslavement of women during the war, remains a particularly contentious point. Despite numerous apologies issued by Japanese leaders, many Chinese perceive them as insufficient. Japan's revisionist tendencies in textbooks and historical narratives contribute to the continued distrust. China's commemoration of the war, particularly the planned Tiananmen Square military parade, and the release of documentaries focusing on Unit 731, demonstrates a concerted effort to maintain this historical narrative. The legacy of the war extends beyond the Nanjing Massacre. The subsequent civil war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, and the early recognition of Mao's regime by Japan, further complicated the relationship. Post-Mao, as China's economic reforms and growing nationalism gained momentum, Japan became a convenient target for nationalist sentiment. The ongoing debate over historical interpretations continues to shape the complex and often strained relationship between the two nations. Mapping Ukraine's frontlines and ceasefire scenarios, the upcoming meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska centers on potential shifts in Ukraine's territorial control, fueled by Russia's long-standing claims and the ongoing conflict. Since 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and supported a separatist movement in the Donbas region, encompassing the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, leading to 8 years of intense fighting. Ukraine suffered approximately 14,000 casualties during this period, culminating in Putin's full-scale invasion in February 2022, resulting in Russia gaining control of significant swaths of territory, including parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson. Currently, Russia controls roughly 20% of Ukraine's territory, primarily focused on advancing slowly in the east. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky insists on an unconditional ceasefire, echoed by European allies. Trump, however, has proposed territorial swaps, creating uncertainty across Kiev and Europe. Russia desires full control of Luhansk and Donetsk, potentially demanding Ukraine cede remaining territory, including strategically vital cities like Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, effectively sacrificing Ukrainian soldiers' lives. For Moscow, this would represent a significant victory, while for Kiev, it would be a deeply unfavorable concession. Recent Russian advances near Dobrapilya are being closely monitored, though their strategic significance remains unclear. Russia is also reportedly offering to freeze the lines of control in Zaporizhia and Kherson, suggesting a willingness to de-escalate the offensive in those areas. The situation remains fluid, with ongoing battles and shifting front lines. The primary goal of the Alaska summit is to achieve a ceasefire, but the specific terms of any potential territorial adjustments remain highly contested and uncertain, with significant implications for the future of the conflict and Ukraine's sovereignty. Escalating tensions in South China Sea. China accuses Philippines of aggressive actions. A significant escalation of tensions in the South China Sea occurred following a collision between Chinese and Philippine vessels near the disputed Scarborough Shoal. China's Defense Ministry issued a formal accusation, stating that Philippine Coast Guard vessels engaged in dangerous maneuvers that posed a direct threat to the safety of Chinese ships and personnel. The ministry, through spokesperson Zhang Bin, emphasized China's firm stance, asserting the nation's right to implement necessary countermeasures in response to the perceived aggression. The incident unfolded on Monday, with Philippine Coast Guard footage revealing a concerning sequence of events. A Chinese Coast Guard ship was observed pursuing the PCG vessel before a sudden and abrupt maneuver by a Chinese Navy ship. This maneuver resulted in a direct collision, causing damage to the Philippine Coast Guard vessel's forecastle. The timing of the incident coincides with a Philippine attempt to deliver supplies to a military outpost in the area, further fueling the dispute. The Chinese government's reaction highlights the ongoing strategic competition in the South China Sea, a region claimed in whole or in part by several nations, including China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. The Scarborough Shoal, a submerged reef located approximately 120 nautical miles west of the Philippines, is a particularly sensitive area controlled by China but claimed by the Philippines. This latest incident underscores the potential for further confrontations and raises concerns about the stability of the region. The assertion of necessary countermeasures indicates a willingness to escalate the situation, suggesting a potential for further actions by either side. The incident is viewed as a deliberate attempt to disrupt Philippine operations and assert China's claims over the disputed waters. China facilitates dialogue amidst border disputes. Recent diplomatic efforts spearheaded by China have focused on de-escalating tensions between Thailand and Cambodia stemming from long-standing border disputes. Foreign ministers from Thailand, Cambodia, and China convened in Anning, Yunnan Province, for informal tea meetings on the sidelines of the Langkang-Mekong Cooperation Foreign Ministers meeting. The primary objective was to foster dialogue and pave the way for a peaceful resolution to the simmering conflict. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi emphasized the importance of Anning, representing peace and harmony, advocating for this principle to guide relations between the neighboring nations. He expressed China's support for both Thailand and Cambodia engaging in dialogue, dispelling misunderstandings and rebuilding mutual trust. A key element of the discussion centered on reopening border crossings to facilitate interaction and meet the needs of the people living in the affected areas. The meetings occurred against a backdrop of recent clashes, including a landmine explosion in late July that wounded Thai soldiers and a subsequent 5-day period of intense fighting that resulted in over 43 fatalities and the displacement of more than 300,000 people. A ceasefire agreement was signed last month, partially influenced by a threat from former U.S. President Donald Trump to withhold a trade deal until the fighting ceased. During the discussions, ministers reaffirmed their commitment to implementing the ceasefire and resolving disputes peacefully. Thai Foreign Minister Maris Sangiampongsa expressed Thailand's appreciation for China's constructive role. A significant point of contention remains the need for demining operations along the border zone, with Thailand highlighting Cambodia's reluctance to participate. The Thai government plans to brief over 50 diplomats on Friday regarding repeated landmine incidents, further emphasizing the urgency of this issue. The overarching goal remains a return to dialogue and a sustainable resolution to the complex border challenges, facilitated by China's diplomatic efforts.